Hi guys, today I'd like to show you a really cool way to think about chromatic notes in jazz improvisation and then apply it to the jazz standard Take the A Train. So chromatic notes are always an option in terms of ornamentation or embellishment, passing tones, approach notes, enclosures, etc. But what I want to talk about today are chromatic notes that express the sound, the character, or the function of a particular non-diatonic chord, much like guide tones, but not limited to the third and seventh of a chord. I like to call them money notes. Let me show you what I mean. One reason I picked Take the A Train to demonstrate this is because it's in the key of C, where the difference between diatonic notes and chromatic notes is super obvious. The diatonic notes are all the white keys on the piano, the C major scale. And the chromatic ones are all the black keys. So once I establish the key of C as my home key for a piece of music, each black key will feel dissonant against it and have a strong tendency towards resolution to a diatonic note. And now here's the cool thing. We can look at each of the 5 chromatic notes as expressions, as representatives, if you will, of various super common non-diatonic chords or progressions. And exploring these relationships will not only deepen our intellectual understanding of jazz progressions, but more importantly, it will train our ears to hear better melodies when we improvise over them. So let's see how all this plays out in Take the A Train. The A section starts on the tonic chord, C6. No surprises there. The next chord is D7. This functions as a secondary dominant chord. D7 is the 5th chord of G, which is a diatonic chord in the key of C. A dominant chord built on the 2nd degree of the scale is a very common occurrence, not just in jazz. Just looking at the basic D7 chord, there's an F sharp, right? That note is not in the key of C, and it's a great note choice to melodically express the underlying D7 chord. Looking at it from a chord scale perspective, we could play D mixolydian. And the only note in D mixolydian that's not in the key of C is F sharp. A more interesting and probably more common scale choice for the D7 chord would be Lydian flat 7, which is the same as A melodic minor. And that adds another chromatic note, G sharp. Talk about a money note. Check out the melody of the song. The G sharp is the most characteristic note in the whole song, the signature note, if you will. It's already really prominently introduced in Duke Ellington's intro. So now we got 2 chromatic money notes to play with, F sharp and G sharp. That right there is the essence of a 2-dominant chord, and you want your ears to internalize that sound, that feeling. Obviously, I'm not gonna play those 2 notes exclusively, but I'm gonna anchor my playing around them. There's another very common scale choice for this chord, and that's the D whole tone scale. This one adds a 3rd chromatic note, A sharp or B flat. The whole tone scale is a symmetrical scale, meaning it has a repetitive interval structure. In this case, whole step, whole step, whole step, whole step, and so on. And with symmetrical scales, it's very common to play scale patterns, like this for example. Notice that we've progressively moved further and further away from the home key of C major. D mixolydian has 1 non-diatonic note, Lydian flat 7 has 2, and the D whole tone scale has 3. So the next question is, how do we get back to the safety of the diatonic scale? Well, the next chord in the progression is D minor 7, which is a diatonic chord, and the scale that fits that chord is D Dorian, which is the 2nd mode of the C major scale. Let's see how we can resolve each of our chromatic notes to a diatonic one. The F sharp can resolve both up or down by half step. Same thing with the G sharp. The B flat best resolves down to A. Now, I'm not saying that these are the only options. We don't always have to resolve these chromatic notes stepwise, but it is the most common thing to do. And of course, we can also create patterns of tension resolution while we're still on the D7 chord. For example, I can play G sharp to A both while on the D7 chord and when I transition from the D7 to the D minor 7 chord. And once again, I want to emphasize that the most important part of this whole equation is our ears. You want to use these money notes to teach your ears to hear, to anticipate the sound of a particular chord. This is true even if I don't actually end up playing the note. It still sounds in my mind and guides me through the progression internally. Okay, so the next chord is G7, the 5th chord of the key that we're in. 5 chords are very often altered and we have 4 different alterations available. Flat 9, sharp 11 and flat 13. Notice that those are 4 out of the 5 chromatic notes we're working with in the key of C. They all resolve convincingly by half step, up or down. So we're 6 bars in and we've already turned all 5 chromatic notes into money notes that express a characteristic of the underlying harmony. In bars 7 and 8 of the first A section, we got a turnaround. There's 100 variations of this. One of the most common would be C major 7 to A7 to D minor 7 to G7 and back to C for the second A section. That A7 chord is another secondary dominant chord whose root is the 6th degree of our C major scale. This 6th dominant chord is ubiquitous in jazz progressions. The third, C sharp, is the most common money note to target here. The flat 9, B flat, also works really well. If you ever want to leave no doubt that you're melodically expressing a 6th dominant chord, just play a 3, 5, flat 7, flat 9 arpeggio. So we got one more spot to cover in this tune, and that's the transition from the second A section into the bridge. In bar 8, it goes G minor 7, C7. And that sets up a temporary modulation to the key of the 4 chord, F major. The most obvious chromatic money note to play on the G minor 7 or C7 is B flat, which resolves great to A, the 3rd of F major 7. But I can also alter the C7 chord, and between the 4 possible altered notes, D flat, D sharp, F sharp, A flat and the 7th, B flat, that means I can play every single one of the 5 chromatic notes as I'm transitioning to the F major chord. Check out how I can use the same pair of dissonant chromatic money note and consonant diatonic note and apply to different harmonic situations. For example, I can play G sharp to A to mark the transition from D7 to D minor 7, or I can use the same melody notes to transition from C7 to F major 7. And that's it. The rest of the bridge section contains chords we've already covered, and the last A section is the same as the first one. Let me play you a chorus where I really lean into those money notes. This is an exercise, so I wouldn't play only this in a real performance necessarily, but once again, the main point here is to get our ears to really hear the progression and the chromatic opportunities it presents. And finally, here is a proper solo chorus where I incorporate the things I've talked about in this video. That's it for today. I hope you got some value from this video. If you did, consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time. Bye.